Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership. Hello, Christeen. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. It's Thursday. It's a beautiful day out in New England. It's like in the 70s.
Wow. We had our first fluffy snow last night.
Wow.
So that was kind of cool to see, but the sun is out again, but I don't think we're going to be getting high temperatures anytime soon.
Yeah, we're not breaking records, but we're in the top 10 warmest Halloweens on record. So pretty cool.
Yeah. Sounds like my kind of day there.
Yeah. It's nice and sunny. I'm excited about today's podcast. We're talking about the retention revolution and crafting cultures that stick. And you came up with that title. Really cool title. I like it.
Yeah. I thought it was fun. You know, the revolution thing I was thinking about it, kind of made me start thinking of, the Beatles song, and which I'm a huge fan. But I was like, yeah, this is perfect.
So you are a big Beatles fan, and I was reminded, I was listening to some Peter and Gordon, and I always was interested how much they sounded like the Beatles. And a friend was sharing with me that Peter part of Peter and Gordon was very, very good friends, and actually lived with Paul McCartney on and off during his teenage years. Yeah. And would write songs with John Lennon. So I was like, that's why they sound so much like the Beatles. And if you're not familiar with Peter and Gordon, I would definitely look them up. They have probably about a dozen hits back in the 60s. But I didn't know that. Now it all made sense. But you are a big Beatles fan, and the retention revolution. Yeah. Crafting cultures that stick, super important. We're going to dive into the essential topic of employee retention, strategies, and best practices today.
Yeah, and this is something that we have worked on a lot in our business. We've been pretty intentional about it. I think since we met, we were both, many years ago, we were both on this path of, how do we create a great culture in the company? How do we not only hire the right employees, but retain the right employees? And I think it's important for us to understand, what does fostering a good culture look like to create retention, and understand how it really impacts our organizational culture, make sure we have retention programs. And one of the things that we both used, and you got really passionate about it, excuse me, and I have to thank you for this, because it gave me the space and availability to someone who's expert on this content to continue to learn about it, is CliftonStrengths, and how it really can have a huge impact on your retention, and also kind of implementing some of the strategies from that methodology into the business.
Yeah, my company grew so fast. We were about 12 to 15 people for years. And it was a very close-knit company. We had high retention, and it was only because we were all friends and family. And then the company doubled in size over the next 5 years. And so it wasn't friends and family. And we weren't really quite sure what a retention plan, an honest, true, intentional retention plan looked like. So we had to become familiar with that. We had to learn how to hire, what a good hire was, what a good hiring process looked like, what onboarding looked like. So retention, we had to learn, retention starts with good hires and good onboarding. And because if you don't hire the right people, they don't stay. If you don't have a really good onboarding program, people don't stay. They decide, 80% of people decide within the first 2 weeks whether they're staying or not. So we want to make sure that we hire the right people, and then We onboard them right. And the CliftonStrengths is a huge part of it. And it's really a fight or flight type of response, because if we stick people, and we've all done it, right? If you stick us in spots where it doesn't line up with our strengths and talent themes, all we can think about is, how do we get out of this? Like,
Right.
our brain just is like, how do we get away from this person? How do we get out of this activity? How do we get away from this thing? So at work, if we're putting people in positions or jobs or activities that don't line up with their strengths, that's all they can think about all day, is how to quit or how to get out of doing the work. So when I hear people say, people don't want to work, those millennials, those Gen Zs, those baby boomers, whatever it is, they don't want to work. Well, what they're really saying is they don't want to work doing things that don't line up with their natural talent themes and strengths. Because what we've both seen and experienced is, when you line people up with their natural talent themes and strengths, you cannot stop them. You actually have to slow them down, because they will overwork, they will overinvest, they will become over involved in those activities. And that creates a whole different culture at work. So CliftonStrengths is absolutely an amazing tool to use to create that that kind of lining up the retention culture.
Yeah. So I think it would give our listeners some insight as we talk about some best practices and some strategies around this topic, to maybe share some insights on how the CliftonStrengths has supported this or made it easier. Because I know for me it has, and it's helped me understand who people in my company are and who they aren't. It has adjusted my expectations as a leader. I can't expect somebody to do or show up in a way that isn't in their strengths. It's just not real. It's kind of, wanting an apple to be a banana. That's not possible, right? So I think it would be good to share that. And high turnover, this is a huge profit bleed in a business. We spend time and money and resources on recruiting. We spend time and money and resources on hiring, on onboarding, training new employees. And then when it doesn't work out and they leave, there's a loss associated with that. So I think that this is something that we have control over if we get a process in place. And, profit doesn't have to be lost in your team. It can be gained in your team. And I think this is an opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, turnover is a huge cost. I've read different reports where it can cost between 100 to 150% of the salary of that employee. So if you're paying someone 50 grand, losing that employee can cost between $50,000 to $75,000 in lost productivity, training time. You can't grow a company if you have this high turnover, right? And low production rates and all kinds of things. And I've seen it with coaching, where we have companies that have high turnover and their profitability is just taking a hit, right, every year, because they always have new people on the job, and you have higher customer turnover also, because they don't have these relationships developing with these people, and you're always training. So the cost of this turnover, I mean, it's in that's just one person, right? So if you have 3 people that you're turning over and you're paying $50,000 each, that could be between $150,000 and $225,000 that it costs that company. I mean, it's a tremendous hit. So it's really worth being super intentional. It's a profit center. Retention is a profit center.
Yes.
So I know we spend a lot of time talking about marketing. How do we get more customers? How do we get the right pricing? But if we have a mindset shift and look at employee retention as a profit center, now it's a different game. Now we're having a different conversation. And if we're talking about employee retention as a marketing center, because these employees now have relationships with clients, and the clients, they want to work with people. They're not working with companies all the time. Sure, they're working with companies, but in, your style of business, my style of business, they want to work with people they have relationships with. So having the same people stay on for years and years It's a huge marketing and a sales tool and deliverables. So it starts to check all the 5 functions of business, right? Marketing,
Right.
sales, deliverables, finance, and people. So retention is a really much larger player in business than it's really ever being focused or talked about.
Yeah. And the other thing I would have to say about retention, if we're losing people and we're, spending money on hiring new, onboarding and training new people, it really takes away from the funds that are available to train the valuable people that stay, right? The right team members. So when we get this retention dialed in, we can reinvest those funds into our current workforce who is there and who is loyal and wants the training and wants a professional success path identified for them so they can grow with the company and they can stay with the company. And I think that that's really important, is how can we, be a better leader by getting this process in place and understanding all the areas of retention so we can use some of those funds to invest in the people we do have.
Oh yeah, imagine if you freed up $150,000 to $225,000 in the business. How much can you invest in your current team? How much training can you do, right, with your current team and improve them? And how much more marketing can you do to your current clients? How much more marketing can you do to obtain new clients? How much development can you do with your management team, with your production team, with software, technology? I mean, a lot of funding becomes available, right? And if you're solely focused on bringing new people up to speed all the time, you're right. You can't be developing your existing team, your leadership, your emerging leaders. It's really big. I mean, now that we're really into this podcast, I read the notes. I've been thinking about this for the last 3 days. But when, verbalizing it and really expanding on it, it has a huge, huge impact. And also in the community, right? Because now most of us are operating our businesses in small communities, right? And they're watching. Why does that company go through so many employees? Why can't they keep anybody? And your customers are seeing that. Why don't people stay there? And that's not a good message to send out in the public.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. And it's a, whole different perspective once we start diving into the details. And one of the things that has come up is that I've tried to coach around for many years, and I had to understand this, is we have a culture regardless of whether we actively shape one or we allow it to develop organically, right? So we can drive and define the culture and what the culture looks like in the business, who shows up, what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable, what do we allow, what does success look like, how do we support each other, how do we communicate each other, what do we, how do we do what we do, right, by being intentional. Or we could just not be involved and not hold the boundaries in place that really define our core values in our business, and let it just be what it is. So either we're going to be intentional about the culture, or we're going to be saying, well, we'll get to it one day. But whatever one you choose, it's happening right now. Like, even as you're listening to this podcast, things that are going on in your business, if you're not having these conversations and developing it, your culture is becoming a life of its own in your business.
So what I hear you saying is whether we're choosing it and defining it and naming it and promoting it or not, it's there. It has a life of its own. It has a name. It has a voice already. And whether we want to own it or not, it's already there.
Right. Yeah. And it's happening every day in businesses, right? So in every business, think of every business out there. If you're driving down the street, look at that business you're driving by. If you're, in a group of people and they're business owners, look at them the next time you're around them and think, are they being intentional about their culture? What is their culture like? How is it in their business? And everyone is going to have either an intentional culture where we're being proactive, we're defining the behaviors, we're involved, we're supporting, the mission, vision, and purpose in the business. The leaders are involved. They know what it looks like. It's teach, support, mentor, follow the policies, processes, things like that, the core values. Or it's that accidental one where it develops organically because we are not talking to our leaders. We are not coordinating with each other. We're not communicating our goals, our core values, our vision, how we service things. And we're letting things in the company like performance or bad behavior, or conflicts or things like that go on without being addressed or checked. Because who's got time for that?
Right. So they're creating their own narrative. So one of the things that I see in the green industry is where you have this accidental culture. I call it the hostage culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced it where you have one or two employees and maybe they have family in the business or friends in the business, and they're going to hold us hostage. So they're kind of threatening, if you don't pay me money or pay us more money, we're going to leave. And I'm going to take me, my brother, my nephew, or 4 of my friends with me. And I had a situation where they all decided they were going to go. At this time, I had 16 people in the company, and back then we were a mowing and lawn application business at that time. So we had, I think, about 10 people in mowing, and the head foreman decided that he was going to take them all to Six Flags. And a couple people didn't go, but the majority of them went. And so I came in, and 4 mowing crews were sitting there, all the trucks, and he was going to show me. So I let them work on Thursday. I let them work all day Friday. And when they came back, I had their pink slips ready to go at the end of the day. And what they were most mad about wasn't that they got fired, was that I made them work Thursday and Friday before I let them go without telling them. And the foreman was very upset. But they thought they were going to hold me hostage. And if I had let that go on, I was letting him write the narrative or create the culture in my business. And I've had other people I've had to coach them through getting rid of the people that think they're holding us hostage. And if we let people do that, we're actually honoring that kind of behavior. It's a codependent relationship, really. Mm-hmm. And I needed to terminate that as quickly as I could. And there's a term a couple of my friends have we need to shoot a hostage. I don't like that term. Sometimes someone starts to develop that attitude, you need to get rid of those people in the company really quickly. But since then, I've learned to hire completely differently.
Right. And, sometimes, and this has happened to me, to where the person was the right person at the time. Right. And then the company grows and the team grows and the culture starts growing, in a better direction, and it's development. And then there's a person on the team that where we were during that time, they were a good fit. And then we moved on, but they didn't move on with us. And this is very common. Not everybody grows at the same rate, the same speed, or even wants to grow with other people. They're very set in not changing, right? Change is a very scary thing. So, a lot of people just don't go sign up for, on the change list to be like, yeah, I'm all in, like, let's go change, and grow. Most people are very comfortable being where they're at because everything outside of that is unknown. So there comes a time in a business where that person was great at one point, but isn't great now. And it makes a huge difference when we let those people go. One, it tells our current team that is the right people, hey, I believe in our values and I'm going to walk the talk, right? We're all on the same page here. The other thing is, if we don't let them go, it's doing a huge disservice to that individual to be able to move on to a company that needs them, and they'll help them grow, at their level and contribute to where they can be great in a role somewhere else that suits them better. So it's really taking away opportunity from the person you're holding on to. And it's not honoring the values that you and your team have worked so hard to grow into.
So on that story I just shared, go 20 years later, I see him in the bank. I recognize him. He comes up to me. I don't know what the conversation. He's apologizing to me for doing that, how immature he was. And I saw his wife who worked at the bank, and she said, he's been wanting to apologize to me for years.
Wow.
So he was just immature, and later on he realized it, which was interesting. But he did not realize it at the time because he was very young. So some people do grow up from that, and they realize what they did. But he definitely got there at some point. Yes. So strong organizational culture is kind of a way to get people to recognize culture, and it starts with the leadership. But the leader can't carry the whole ball of wax all the time. So it's really important to share it with our first followers and create that and get that out to our team. And the first followers don't always have to be managers, right? They don't always have to be our right-hand people or our leader, like top-tier leaders. It can go all the way through the whole organization, but we want to share that with everybody in the organization, create and share the visions, the core values, the immutable laws, and really make it an inclusive environment.
Yeah. And this is something that shows up in the CliftonStrengths methodology, is being seen and heard, feeling included. And that's part of the 12 levels that you have taught on in our strengths workshops. And, that's important in an organization for somebody to feel that they're a part of something. So a sense of belonging or purpose.
And I think what I have found is just literally giving someone the CliftonStrengths assessment and sitting down and talking about it. They have never experienced that anywhere, any place they've worked. Typically, maybe they've had the disc, but no one sat down and said, hey, this is what is unique about you and what we're going to honor when you work here. That blows them away. And sometimes they're a little suspect about it. But we do training here during the year, and during the winter we do a more like in depth. So they're like, okay, this is really cool. And then we talk about how to honor it and how to aim it, right? So just being paid attention to in that way, it levels up their engagement. And then, we're talking about it really frequently. It's on their little wall pockets. It's on their books. About a month ago, I was walking past the landscape crews, and they were talking about one particular job, and they were talking about which strengths were needed on that job. They really were talking about restorative, particularly because it was a paver job that had multiple levels, and restorative is a problem-solving strength that shows up, that really can contribute to that. So they're recognizing what strengths can be used in what type of jobs. And to be recognized and seen and heard for the talents that you bring completely changes the culture. Because at school, I have activator, communication, maximizer, woo. So I'm like, go, talk loud, and overdo everything. So you can imagine that individual in elementary school being told to sit down, shut up, and be quiet. The challenges and struggles that I had to endure, that's not a reality for me. Calm down. Shh. Be quiet. Sit still. Like, that is just not something I live with. So, read this thing with your learning disabilities, write all this long stuff and then read all this stuff, did not feel seen or heard in many, many occasions. And I think maybe that's why this is so important to me, because I spent a life of education not feeling seen or heard. Yeah. So now that I am a leader of a company, I feel it. So my individualization is my number 4. I feel I'm compelled to have a career of seeing and hearing and acknowledging people as individuals.
Yeah. And that's important, in the strong culture concept, because when we see and hear them, we can also acknowledge the proper behaviors that they're contributing to the culture. And in addition to that, we can reward people in the culture when they're, contributing, they're creating a profit in the company, they're supporting our goals, they're supporting our vision. A company that isn't profitable cannot create any sort of bonus or reward program. They don't have the money for it, nor do they have the desire to give it to people, right? Because they're like, who's showing up? These people. What are they doing? It's just all these problems. But when the people show up and they contribute and we see and hear them and we understand their strengths and they're aligned with our core values and our mission and vision, the company is more profitable. We're more connected, collaborative, and there's that desire to reward and acknowledge. So I think that also says something when we're hiring and we're retaining people and if you don't have one yet, it's okay to communicate that you're working on one, because it says something. It says, I'm interested in creating a good culture. I'm interested in rewarding the people that work for my company. This is something I want to do. We have to get there, guys. So I think that it's okay to communicate that. And I've done that with my team. I've had clients that's done that. And though a couple years ago, they did not have a reward system or a bonus system, now they do. And it's tied to that person's role. And it's tied to what that person's supposed to, create and produce. So I think that is in align, with that strong culture that you're trying to create.
Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro.
And recognizing what the company is, right? So we're executing relationship company. So aligning the whole company together and recognizing what the company is and who matches up with that, right? So we have relationship and executing. Those are the two dominant themes in our company. So just being aware of that. So for example, like at the Christmas parties we used to have, they were kind of like, we would play a little bit of games, but then we would eat, and it would kind of be boring and a little actually awkward, right? But when we got into CliftonStrengths, I'm like executing. All right, let's get everybody up. We're going to do stuff at these Christmas parties. So now we have Jenga and cornhole and bingo, and there's a lot more action and movement. And now the Christmas parties are a blast. We do this. It's a saran wrap ball. And they like wrap it up with these gifts inside. You roll the dice, and then once a pair is rolled, the person goes around. It's insane. The activity level and the energy at the Christmas party now with these activities, because they're executing and it's highly engaged, especially that saran wrap ball. There's a lot of relationship that goes on in these games. So designing the parties for the company around the strengths, right? If they were strategic thinking and influencing themed we would change it a little different, right? But even designing how we meet and how we communicate together as a company is based around the CliftonStrengths of the company. So, and that creates, the culture is very different. Now people are looking forward to the Christmas party instead of being this really awkward, really, because, we don't work together as a company all the time. We don't get together. So some of these people don't really, especially the lawn technicians, they work alone. So they don't really know each other that well, where the office staff might know each other much better. So having the activity of the doing with the executing strength it changed the whole party.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example, because in our retention, right, if we're designing a retention program, right, we're being intentional about it. So I kind of want to talk about a retention by design versus retention by default, and help the audience understand what does this mean? Like, if we're going to do a retention program, how can we be intentional about it? So this is where a company actively creates a retention program that focuses on that development structure, to keep the employees engaged, right, and satisfied. And so what does that mean? How do we structure this to keep employees engaged and satisfied? So this means that we're looking at, what are their roles, right? What is it that their purpose of their job? What is it that they're supposed to do, right? We've talked about expectations a lot on this podcast. Expectations are key. This is what success looks like in your role. This is what I need you to do. And even KPIs, so key performance indicators, that might be associated with their role. So that's part of a retention program, right? So that's a piece of it, like a little stepping stone. It also includes us having conversations with our people about that development path. And I know, Steve, you have a 1,000-day development program that you've been intentionally working on. And it's really a retention program. Let's be real, right? But it's a development program that your people move through. And one of the conversations you have with them is, what do you want in this company? What do you envision? What does success look like? Do you always want this role? Do you want to grow in this role? And some of it you just design intentionally, because some of the people that you talk to, they don't know. They've never been asked these questions, right? So typically people in a labor role or a technician role, no one has sat down and said, "Excuse me, will you share your hopes and dreams with me? What does that look like? If you could have anything you want," right? Like they haven't lived that life per se to where someone's talked to them about that. So you've built some of that into your program to start helping them understand, hey, everybody has hopes and dreams and they're great. What are yours? And maybe priming that pump. There's also, compensation is included in this retention program, letting your team know what's your potential or the opportunity with your personal income, right? So does it serve the life that they're thinking of? And then one of the most important things is that positive work environment. Nobody wants to work at a company that is negative, that has a bunch of chitter chatter going on, non-supportive, where people aren't supporting each other, where there's like these little cliques. That's not a fun place to work. So all of this that's a by design and a retention program, is where you're thinking about these things.
And it does not have to be complicated. When we rolled out our career ladder that basically showed people, like, this is like a lawn tech, right? A new lawn tech in training. This is how much they get paid. This is a lawn tech, a full lawn tech. This is what they have to do as far as their expectations, and this is what they make. This is a senior lawn tech. This is the expectations of a senior lawn tech, and this is what they get paid. And then up and up it goes. And then that was like, people like, oh, okay, well, I want to be this. Now I know what I have to do to become that. So that's kind of the first level of the engagement hierarchy, is knowing what's expected and what I can make. So when we're talking about our employees and our team, they go home and they tell their spouse, right? This is what I can make if I do this. So now it's a conversation. Now they have motivation. They can share it with their friends. They can share it with their family. they have opportunity, because most places are not sharing opportunity. It's kind of like, come to work hard. I don't know when you're going to get a raise. I don't know. They're not sharing how to move forward. Also, the other thing I found is some people do not want to move forward. So there's also ways of having increased compensation with not changing your job here. So when you go through the 1,000-day development plan, as you go through each stages of that plan and you become a different person, as you become, more educated about mindset and CliftonStrengths and the 5 functions of business, you can keep the same job that you're in, but you're becoming a different person. You can also increase your compensation. So you don't have to become a manager. You don't have to become a senior tech. You don't have to become a different job person. You can get your compensation increased by just becoming, a different person through education and development.
Yeah. And just to share, for our listeners, what you're saying here is that development and that change of that individual is going to produce a more effective and profitable role, which is why that higher compensation comes into play, because it's almost like they're mastering their role in the company.
Yes, right. Yeah, because we thought, and I've interviewed a lot of people, and I'll talk to anybody, front desk, office, restaurant, gas station, manufacturing, wherever I go, and I'll ask them all kinds of questions about how long have you worked here? Why do you work here? What did you do before? Tell me about the onboarding, the training. And what I found is a lot of people really like their job and they're almost terrified to be promoted because they love what they're doing and they don't want to be a manager. They've seen like area manager or a district area manager. They've seen them come and go and they've seen what they've done and they like their job because it fits into their lifestyle. So they want to get training, they want to improve, but they don't want to change that job. So if we can train people to master their job they're in, like Christeen said, and improve their skills with what they're currently doing and become even better, that's what I found most people were more interested in that. So we can keep people on the front line or we can keep people in support roles and pay them more. And they're just becoming better and more, they're making the company more profitable. So again, it's a little bit of mind shift, thinking that the only way to make more money is moving up or out. And that's not really how it works. We can become much more efficient and productive where we are.
Yeah. So then there's the other side of this where it's, your retention program by default. And even without a program, retention is taking place in your business. So you might be like, oh, well, we don't have everybody that turns over, right? So people stay. And it's typically, a percentage of the business. Like you'll have like kind of key roles where people stay. And what's happening in the business is because we're not talking about how are you doing or these are the goals or this is what we're aiming towards or this is the mission or the core values of the company. The employees that you do have are thinking about their place and their role and what they're doing on a regular basis. So it's constantly being weighed and measured instead of a space being created to weigh and measure their performance, like an annual review. We have annual reviews. Every year, this time of year, we send out a, hey, review yourself survey. We do a review them survey as their manager. We sit down, we have a meeting and give feedback, and we go over their job description and their KPIs. Again, right? Like, let's just touch base on this again. And we have conversations. So we talk about what they're doing great and we want them to continue to do and areas for opportunity. But I guarantee if we weren't having those conversations intentionally, they would be thinking about this every day, every week, and even let's say you have a bad review program. If your review program isn't constructive and transparent, they're still going to be thinking about their engagement and their role in the business on a regular basis. So this unstructured retention program, it allows, for turnover even at a higher rate. So even those people that are staying right now, eventually they're going to leave. right? It's not forever. It's just for amount of time. So if that's the case, now would be a good time to get that retention program in place and start working on it so the right people stay and you continue to hire the right people and have these conversations and create that engagement that you want.
So one of the biggest pushbacks I get on this conversation is, why should I do that? I pay them. They should just do the job. Why should I have to tell them they're doing a good job? No one's telling me that I'm doing a good job. Well, earlier in the podcast, we talked about, it's if you're paying someone $40,000 or $50,000, it's their pay or 150% of their pay. So if it's $50,000 a year, it's between $50,000 and $75,000, right? So that's really a get over yourself and become a leader and a manager in the company. And this is how to grow a company. So that's that old school thinking, that industrial, work or be fired mentality. And that's not today. That's not 2024. That wasn't even 2018. That probably wasn't even 2000. So it's just not an existence of a rational, productive mindset if you want a highly profitable company with low turnover. If you want to struggle and wonder why nobody wants to work and why you have high constant turnover and low profitability, or you're struggling with profitability, that's the mindset. So yes, it's just one of those things that we have to get over. Now, that's a very specific strength that will say that, and so they might need somebody else who has different strengths in their company to handle the retention program. It might have to be somebody else who has the relationship or the influencing strengths, and not somebody who has strategic and like competition or significant or command. That those strengths really struggle with the why should I tell somebody else they're doing a good job? I paid them.
Right.
So just realize what your strengths are. So if you're struggling with that, maybe you find another champion in the company that can be a bit of a cheerleader, because coach as cheerleader is, Nick Saban, one of the all-time greatest football coaches. He was a cheerleader. He was a motivator and a cheerleader and first, and a strategist and a tactician second, because anybody can draw X's and O's on a board. But he got his team to win when it didn't look like they could. So if you are not that person, definitely get somebody in your company who is.
Yeah. And I call that the madman mentality, right? Where it's like, pull your bootstraps up, rub some dirt on it, like keep going. And I was raised that way. So I completely get it. It makes me think of like my dad, my grandpa, it's like I hear myself 20 years ago saying this to my girls, like, walk it off, you're fine. And I even find myself today, like it's one of the first things that wants to come out of my mouth when, my boy who's 7 years old, like something happens and I have to like stop myself. So I understand that mindset. There's a way to get people's willingness, right, and get them invested, and them still be gritty, right? So it doesn't have to be just that unacknowledgement of feelings, emotions, perceptions, things like that. We can still kind of have that grittiness about us, and at the same time, make sure that person feels seen and heard. And I say that because that's been my journey of not wanting to see and hear that person, because man, that takes time. Who's got that? Right. But taking just a few minutes, because I realized that investing in that seen and heard concept, one, it helped me grow and it helped them, and we got further faster.
Absolutely. And you'll hear people say, don't get emotional, right? And the challenge, because it's like weakness, you're going to make the wrong decision. I would say get emotional. Emotions give us strength. Emotions give us fortitude, grit, right? So we might find our grittiness in our strengths or our life's experience, but let them find their grittiness through their strengths and their life experience. And it might be very different. So they might be gritty in a very different way. And not everybody's going to be gritty the same way we are.
Right. So I want to talk about some best practices in retention. And these are things, Steve, that I like that we're sharing these because we have both implemented them in our businesses. We have both used these practices and learned how to use these practices, and we have seen the outcome. And not only have we done it in our businesses, but we have coached people in doing it in their businesses, and we've seen an effective outcome. So this isn't just a list where we're like, oh yeah, this just sounds really great. Let's talk about this. This is from experience. This is something that we have done and we have helped others done, and we've seen the impact that it's had on their business. And so some of these best practices in retention in a business is regular feedback and communication. And that means that we're keeping open communication channels. We're maintaining that transparency and connecting and giving those like regular updates, right, between the employee and the manager. What does your work week look like? What are you going to accomplish? Great. How can I help? They're not going to tell you that they want help, but it's always great that you ask them, how can I help? And they might say, well, I think I got this, but I'll let you know. Or I might just need you to show me this, right? But it shows them you're there to support them. And another thing is constructive feedback. So, we don't want to, when somebody does something wrong, we don't want to just come out and, give them a good what for, right?
No.
There needs to be a conversation, and everything in us might just be like, oh, I'm going to chew someone up and spit them out like you are fit to be tied. I get it. Right? I've been there. I have to slow down and go, okay, breathe. Let's be curious here. So, one is conducting those regular performance interviews like I talked about in my company. I do every year. We're looking at their performance. They're rating them. We're rating them. We're talking about things, opportunities really for growth and improvement. But there is a place where we need to give feedback to somebody. It doesn't have to be negative. It can be, and it's a great feedback method by Marcus Buckingham, and I've used this, and it has helped me with my sharp tongue and attitude. Is, this happened. I feel this way, and I would like to understand more. And then I just shut up and they talk. I give them space to talk. So what I'm really doing is just stating facts that something happened. I'm stating my feelings, which people can't argue how someone feels. And then I'm asking, for more understanding. So it gives that opportunity to understand what really happened, getting the full story on both sides, and the person that we're trying to connect with where something, not the best outcome happened, but to have a real conversation about it so we can get to the bottom of it and it doesn't happen again without them feeling attacked and defensive.
And I think that's the big issue, is if having people feel attacked and defensive. So only pointing out stuff when people do it bad. So one of the things, reinforcing positive behavior and positive actions should be about 80%, right? So it's very much like us, right? When my wife points out, oh, I really appreciate it when you did this. Hey, I really liked it when you did that. Or, the meal you made, or when you got me that, or I noticed that you did this. Guess what's going to happen again, right? But if she's like, oh, I didn't like this and that, I'm like, oh, really? I messed up again, right? And if the boss is the same way, that's all they do is point out, they want to please their managers and their bosses, not us personally. Maybe they do want to please us personally, but they also want to please the person they're reporting to. They want to please their clients. They want to please the customers. So that positive feedback, especially if their love language is words of encouragement, right? They want to hear that. So we want to do always more words of encouragement than words of discouragement. I had a manager where we were getting lots of problems, and I would say, well, why didn't they call you? And I said, why didn't you call your manager? Oh, I didn't want to bother him. Mm-hmm. So we were getting a lot of issues because they didn't want to bother the manager. And really it was, they didn't want to get their ass chewed because of having a question. So we had to change that. And it took 2 years of working through that. And it was the manager's response, who was the manager. It really came back to me, though. I take responsibility for it because he was overworked. He had way too many responsibilities, way too much on his plate. So when he was getting these calls and interruptions, he was in like slow brain function concentration. So it was a major interruption. So he had this emotional response of what the hell? And so they would get the brunt of it. But really, it came back to me. So I had to find that space and get an assistant manager to take those calls because it was really came back to me. So, right, everything starts at the top. So if we don't like what's going on in our company, we got to look at, the top. But I had to change the system, change what was going on. I wasn't mad at him. I wasn't mad at my team. I had to change. It was a signal. It was a sounding bell. I had to listen. I was like, okay, whoa, what's going on, right? And figure out, well, he's already working too many hours, and then he's getting interrupted when he's doing this really important routing function or billing function or something. So what's the real issue, right? And what's the real challenge?
Another one is best practice is engagement surveys. And we send out an engagement survey every quarter. We do this by leveraging a software that I really like. We've built it out. It's called 15.5. So it makes those engagement surveys easy. But you don't need a software to send out an engagement survey, right? Like you could do little Google surveys or something like that. It could be completely confidential. So what the intention of these are really to understand what your employees need and want, and also understand like what areas could be improved. And you can find, I'm sure you could even just Google, like, what are some good questions to ask on an engagement survey? Or these days, ask AI, right? Like, what are the best questions to ask on engagement surveys for this type of company? And it's going to give you a list of questions. I would say start small, make it easy, but it's going to give us insight on where the gaps are that we may not see because as managers or business owners, we're too busy in the day-to-day and we may not be aware of these, or they may not feel comfortable communicating it. So those engagement surveys give us some really great insight. And then even as Steve touched on, team activities, right? So organized team retreats, workshops, special events, things that strengthen the bond. And Steve realized in his first Christmas parties, like they were getting together, but they weren't connecting. So identified, okay, what do we need to do to connect? And fixed that. And now these team building activities, they're very productive. They're producing the outcome that we want, which is that connection, building that relationship, that connection and trust.
And some of the team activities are, we're doing field trips. So if people have high context and they love history, we've gone to war museums, history museums. We're planning a trip to go to the Cooperstown Baseball Hall of Fame. So doing some field trips with teams and spending some quality time together, because it can't all be work all the time. If you're going to be working together for years, having different connections actually make us more productive as teams. And that starts with profitability and productivity, high levels of productivity.
All right. And the last thing I just want to touch on before we tie up today is the compensation and benefits, right? And we want to make sure that we have competitive packages when it comes to compensation. We want to make sure that they are aligned with industry standards for one, right? We're looking at like, what's the market rate? And does this person have the skill set for us to pay above that? So typically, it's important to make sure that you have a competitive pay rate and you're not paying below market, because people will leave and go find a job somewhere else. Another opportunity is the benefits program. You may not be in a place right now, and that's okay, but really bring that into your business plan as you do grow your company, to include healthcare, retirement plans, and other things that your employees or your future employees may really need or want. So that's another area of opportunity when it comes to your retention program, is that compensation and those benefits that you can offer your employees.
And a couple things as we go toward the conclusion of this podcast is to analyze your trends in your company. So regularly, review how much turnover you have and pay attention to the percentage of your turnover, because you want to be always improving that. And do exit interviews when people leave. Just kind of do an informal interview, but record the answers, because you're looking for trends. Is it always the same thing? Or are they leaving? Is it a unique situation, or are they leaving all the time for the same reasons? And see where you can make improvements on that. And, stay updated on innovations and technology and new ideas and trends. Why are people staying and why are they leaving? And what's happening in the industry that you can tap into and take advantage of.
Right.
So thank you for joining us on today's Retention Revolution, Crafting Cultures That Stick. And we look forward to you joining us on the next podcast. Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.